Well, Sherry, I'm so glad that you're here and we are welcoming you today. And I would like you to ask if you can introduce yourself to let the people know what is your background, what you are interested in work in, and which is the organization that you work for. Can you let us know a little bit about those things?
Sure, of course. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be at this Congress. And my name is Sherry Hambi, and I'm a distinguished research professor in psychology at the University of the South, which is in Tennessee in the United States. And I'm also the director of the LifePath Research Center there. And my work focuses on trauma and resilience. So for many years, I started off mostly focusing on child abuse and family violence and the kinds of things we've been talking about at this Congress. And I used to take a pretty traditional approach where there was a lot of focus on PTSD and depression and symptoms and problems, but now I really focus on healing and resilience and helping people develop strengths-based approaches to overcoming trauma so they can thrive even if a lot of bad things have happened in the past.
That sounds amazing, really. Is there anything that any strategy or technique that you will prefer to use to promote those kind of or those type of work?
Yes, one of the things we have found is that a lot of the techniques that have developed mostly in the field of positive psychology are also incredibly helpful for people who have experienced violence or other kinds of trauma. So we are really encouraging practitioners of all types, whether they're therapists or social workers or teachers, to consider bringing things into their work like mindfulness meditation, which is really sort of incredibly powerful, and things like exercise, which we now know is just as effective as psychotherapy or medication for depression and anxiety. Also, different kinds of meaning-making activities, whether that's telling your story or doing art or volunteering for an organization. And then really focusing on helping, especially like young people, develop their relationships and their social networks, because most of the time as therapists or even as teachers, you're not going to be in someone's life for very long. And so turning more attention to helping them develop the friendships and the connections that they're going to need to have a good life in the long run.
That sounds really fantastic, and it's very innovative as well. You know, it's something like it makes think a lot of people that, oh, what is she saying us? You know, it's very important that it seems that there is a lot of research behind those efforts. And
there is a lot of research behind it, and it is really a new way of thinking about it. And you know, I think sometimes people think that those things aren't like real therapy. But if we think about what we want, which is to help kids be happy and families be happy and communities to thrive and do well, like those things really help people move towards that state of well-being in a way that honestly, there are some real limits to how much we can help them if we just are constantly looking backwards to the bad things that are happened to them and kind of talking about that and processing it. It's important to do that at some point, but I think too much therapy kind of stops there, and it doesn't then like turn and look to the future and like, well, what do you want your life to be like going forward? And I think this more strengths-based approach is really revolutionizing the way that we think about therapy. And
wonderful, wonderful. So in considering all that, if there is any recommendation that you think that it would be good for us to hear from you's work?
Sure. Well, I mean, of course, there's getting into that. I mean, I have really I mean, I love the time that I have spent in Chile because in some ways I think that you are really already ahead of the United States in some of these areas because we can get very isolated from each other and we don't always think about communities before we think about individuals or even families before we think about individuals. And so I really always enjoy coming to a more collective place where there is more emphasis on community well-being and on community structures. And I think you talk more explicitly about what would a society look like that is good for children and families in some ways than we do. But it's still at the same time, you know what I often tell people, and I don't think they always really like listening to this, but our science has changed a lot. I mean, I have been in the field for over 30 years now, and I tell people that honestly, you really should not be using the kinds of techniques that I learned in graduate school, because even though those techniques have some good things about them, they are not as strong and powerful as some of the things that we have figured that out. And I don't think that people do enough to realize that they're going to have to keep changing the kinds of services they offer and that they can keep getting their services better. And I sometimes think that medicine does a little bit better than us than that, because if somebody got diagnosed with cancer and then they went to see an oncologist, nobody would give them the medication that they were giving them in 1980 or 1990.
Totally.
Yeah, you know, because there's much better medication out there now. And the same thing is true for therapy. Like, there's much better therapy out there than the therapy that I got trained to do in the 1980s and 90s. And all of us need to learn how to do those things and start offering to them. And then we can really help people. But it's given me like a really big second wind and a lift in my career, because it has made me feel so much more hopeful that we can be more impactful than we have been.
It does really make sense, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
really. Thank you for that. I wonder what will be your last thoughts about what this Congress has been for you and what you have liked or enjoyed. If there is anything that you might let us know in terms of how you have felt in this place.
I have been having a wonderful time at the Congress, and I think these kinds of events are so important, and that this getting to spend time face to face with the people who are doing the same kind of work that we are, and talking from people in different communities and in different organizations. And I have just come, the longer I've been in my career, to more and more appreciate how important these kinds of experiences are. And I know that they are a ton of work to organize, and I've been very impressed with how this conference has been organized and with all of the people that are here. And I'm, again, like, so grateful for having been invited to come.
Oh, thank you for coming. You really had, made our Congress, to write more and more because of your presence here. So thank you so much for your contribution to our community.
Oh, thank you, Paula.
Thank you.